Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila.
Well, we were waiting for Srila Prabhupada. We were having kirtan, and then suddenly Prabhupada just appeared there. It's like he was like a genie out the lamp, I guess. No, it wasn't only me, because I was with Nanda, and he was chanting and playing mridanga, Nanda Maharaja. And he also he said, Prabhupada, he just suddenly, Prabhupada, he just seemed to stop. And Prabhupada was standing there, very aristocratic, and then he was just looking at all the devotees there, one after another, and then he looked at me, the new bhakta, and then, he just looked straight through me, and as if to say, I'm looking for you, I'm coming for you, not what you think you are, all these identities you have. I'm seeing you as Krishna's devotee, I'm coming to get you. And I was thinking that, I'm standing here in Calcutta airport, I'm completely naked, the whole world is watching me. I've got nothing to hide from this man. He's seeing me. So then everybody had a garland to give. They went forward and offered their garlands. So I went forward to offer my garland also, and I had a little brass bowl with rose petals. They said, when Prabhupada comes, you should throw these petals before him. Anyway, I went and I offered the garland to Prabhupada, and the little bowl I still had in my hand, it just touched Prabhupada here, and it made a little ringing sound. It was just ding, like as it. But I was so close to Prabhupada at that time, in his eyes, I was looking at his eyes, but it didn't even blink. When something comes close to your eyes, so what to speak of touching your eye, but Prabhupada, he didn't blink, it didn't even waver. And I thought, wow, this person is completely peaceful, completely tranquil. My ideas of spiritual life was, that complete peace, harmony. You walk into the water, no ripples coming out and things like that. And this was that Prabhupada. What I'm looking for, what I'm aspiring for, what I think is spiritual, Prabhupada's got it. He's got it. He's got what I was searching for. And a lot of other devotees had that same experience when I spoke to them. What they were looking for, they saw it in Prabhupada. I don't think it was Prabhupada manifesting it, but I think Krishna was manifesting it. Here, what you're looking for, you found in my devotee. And then I paid my obeisances, and when I got up, no one was there. I don't know how long I've been paying my obeisances. Anyway, by the time we got back to Calcutta, Prabhupada was already in the temple. He was giving his lecture, arrival address lecture. So I thought, now I'm going to hear Prabhupada. I've been reading these books, and now I'm going to actually see him. So I sat down, and he had already started his lecture, so the first thing I kind of heard him say was, so do not try to see God. And I thought that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're all out there seeking, and I thought that was the whole idea. We come to look for God. I meet the greatest saint I've met so far, and he's saying, do not try to see God. But then he said, but you act in such a way that God will see you by a performance of your devotional bhakti. So that was the first impression of meeting Prabhupada.
So it was February of 1971, and I joined the temple at Sevenbury Place in London. And Prabhupada was coming in August. So Mukunda Prabhu, now Mukunda Goswami, was a temple president, and he recognized that I had some clerical skills. So besides going out every day and chanting on Harinam and distributing Back to Godhead magazines, I also spent some time in the office every day. So preparing for Prabhupada's arrival, possibly because, again, I had some clerical skills, I was sent to a shop in London to pick up a dictation machine for Srila Prabhupada's translations. Now, the dictation machine, of course, is a machine itself, and then there's a microphone with an on-off button and then a coiled wire. So I picked up the machine, I brought it back to the temple. Prabhupada was at the temple by that time, and I gave it to his secretary. The next day I was called into Prabhupada's room. And I was, oh, what's going on? So I knocked on the door, entered, paid my obeisances. Prabhupada held up the microphone. He said, "It is useless." Oh my goodness. I received the microphone from Srila Prabhupada, ran, it was probably 20 minutes or so, to this shop, replaced the microphone, ran back to the temple, and gave it to Prabhupada's secretary. Perhaps it was Shyam Sundar. The next day I was called into Prabhupada's room. This time, however, he was holding the microphone and he was absolutely beaming. So I, Mr. Too Much Information, began to explain to Prabhupada that this and this and this is what was wrong, what were wrong with the previous microphone. And he stopped me. He said, "I do not want to know what was wrong with the other microphone. I'm simply happy that this one is working." So he taught me this lesson, that details and facts that I may find absolutely fascinating, if they don't really help the spiritual master in his mission, don't burden him with unnecessary information. Simply do your duty to the best of your ability, and that is how he will be pleased. A few days later, it was after the morning program, perhaps 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, and just a few devotees and I were in the temple. Again, this was Seven Bury Place in London. And the curtains were open, and we were chanting before the deities. All of a sudden, Prabhupada walks in. We immediately fall flat. We get up. Prabhupada comes very, very close. There was a little guardrail, comes very, very close to Shri Shri Radha London Ishwara. He observes them. And then I said, with folded palms, I said, "Srila Prabhupada." I said, "Srila Prabhupada, do you like the way Lord Krishna is dressed?" He said, "He's very beautiful." Then he stood there observing the deities for a little longer. And then in my mind, I simply thought, "And Srila Prabhupada, what about Srimati Radharani?" He paused and he looked at me and he said, "Srimati Radharani is also very beautiful." So Prabhupada was demonstrating that although he appeared in human form, he had capabilities and consciousness and powers far beyond those of any mortal human being.
At that time, we were having a Pandal program in Deshapriya Park in Calcutta. It was during that period. And so then after the program, Prabhupada would generally be invited to someone, either a relative of his, because they knew him, or a local person. But now Prabhupada was the hero. He came back with his Western disciples. And so we all went to this house. It's one of those typical Bengali community houses, you know, with the open space in the courtyard in the middle. And everyone was there, all the noise and all the kids. And Prabhupada was kind of completely relaxed, and all the commotion, everyone was coming in and settling down. Prabhupada was just sitting down there relaxed. All the kids and everything playing around the lower. And Prabhupada was kind of just getting settled. And I was in the room, and I was packed up, and I was sitting up the back wall. I was sitting next to Jadubar's wife, Vishaka Devi. She was Jean at that time. And Jadubar got initiated at the same time. He was John, right? Yeah. And but she didn't get initiated at that time. She got a bit later. But anyway, I was sitting next to her and talking to her, you know, about Krishna consciousness and how great it is, and Prabhupada and things like that. And you know, I was just brand new. I didn't know, in India especially, there wasn't such much emphasis on separation of the men and women. We didn't know at that time, did we, in those days? So anyway, I was rapping away with Vishaka and then Prabhupada, by the time he kind of got settled, and then he was, and then he started looking, and I could see he was kind of straining it a bit, and he was looking at me, and And I thought, am I doing? And he had like a kind of a stern look on his face, and he was. And I thought, am I doing something wrong? And I thought, well, I guess I am. I've just got initiated. I got this saffron cloth on, and I'm talking to this Mataji, and there's all the family members around. That's their culture. They know the culture very well. And and I think Prabhupada was. And I said, I think I better finish talking. I kind of moved away from Vishakadevi. But I think Prabhupada was showing a little bit of his disapproval that I was doing. But we were pretty innocent in those days.
When I first joined, one thing that kind of put me off was how devoted the devotees were to Srila Prabhupada. I did, because of my personalist conditioning and dark heart, I couldn't understand how could they be so excited about this one person. And I had started reading Bhagavad Gita, and that's where this torchlight of knowledge really lit up my heart. Because previous to that, I had read different books by Ramakrishna, and even though it's very flowery and wordy and thick, there's no real practical application. So reading Bhagavad Gita was like really wonderful like that. And so when we went to see Srila Prabhupada for the first time on Wednesday evenings, the devotees would go up. I hadn't actually joined the temple yet. We piled in a car and went up. And I had these questions since I was a young girl. Basic questions like, who am I? Where am I going? What am I doing here? And even though my father taught theology at Loyola Marymount, he had no answers for me. So it was so amazing that I had these questions, and I thought I'd ask, but when I got there, I was overwhelmed by all the devotees and all the enthusiasm. I didn't have the courage to raise my hand and ask Prabhupada any questions. But when he came out and he gave the lecture, he answered every question in order that I had in my mind. It was so amazing. And I knew there that this is why everyone is so enthusiastic and so devoted to Srila Prabhupada. So that's when it first started.
At my initiation, I remember 3 of the 4 regs, and then I thought, what was the last one? And I kind of completely slipped my mind. And I said, oh, intoxication, Prabhupada. Because that was the only thing I was into, actually. I've been in India kind of, so there was none of the, I was trying to follow everything, but we were following the sadhus and everything in India, and they were smoking and everything like that with their intoxication. I was surprised. I said all the 3, but the one I was not doing at that time. And I looked at Prabhupada and smiled. And oh, no intoxication. He said, okay, good.
So I flew to Bombay in a cheap flight, and I did my research, started my research. I had a camera with me, a film, to develop, to work with. It was, in those days, it was Super 8, I think. And then a little recorder for sound. And I started walking around Bombay first. Just went to all different places. I went to temples, and I could not find any Krishna temple. I saw deities, Vishnu deities, Shiva deities, Durga deities, Ganesh, a lot of Ganesh. I could not find Krishna. And I was not just looking for Krishna, I wanted a temple where Radha was involved. So Radha and Krishna temple. Because that was the song. It was about Krishna, Rama Krishna, and Radha Krishna. Because the name of the group, the Prabhupada's band, was called the Radha Krishna Temple. So I went there and I spent about a week first, and I stayed in cheap hotels. And then one day I was going to Nariman Point. It was like the rich area. And there were even less temples there. The temples get smaller. And some of them were in trees. And then somebody said, oh, I know there is a temple, there's a Krishna temple. So I said, is that Radha Krishna temple? He said, yeah, Radha Krishna temple, Radha Krishna temple. So he pointed out where it was. It was one of the skyscrapers there. I can't remember the floor. But I went up, I took the elevator, and I found the Radha Krishna temple. But it was the Hare Krishna temple that I already seen in the Netherlands. So I went inside, and then a lady was there, Madhuri was her name, and she asked me to sit down, and thank you for coming here, and she gave me a glass of water. And she said, you know, please feel free, the deeds are here, they're for you to have a look at and see how beautiful they are. And so I said, the devotees will come soon. She thought I was probably looking for some devotees. So then about an hour passed, 2 hours, and then finally the devotees came in. Narayana opened the door, Haribo, Haribo. Then I met Shyam Sundar, and they wanted me to come with them to Juhu. They said, our Guru Maharaj is there, and he's going to speak. There is a pandal. I didn't know what a pandal was, but he was going to speak. And I know he was a very powerful person, because he did it so quick. He just totally changed the idea about India by just having the Hare Krishna mantra become very popular, even on the pop charts. So I was like, that is quite amazing that I'm going to see Srila Prabhupada, or Prabhupada tomorrow, or the Swamiji. And so we took the taxis and we went to Juhu, and it was, the pandal was ready there, and then Shyam Sundar asked me to tape, because he forgot his tape recorder. So I used my little equipment, and that's when I did taping Srila Prabhupada first, who was sitting in the Vyasasana, and I was taping a little microphone on the big microphone. And I sat down. I just followed Shyam Sundar, said, so you just sit down next to Prabhupada there. I still had long hair. So Prabhupada sort of looked over to the left, and he was just wondering, who is that there? So anyway, he gave his lecture. It was very hard for me to understand because of the accent. And then also the sound was a little bit coming back, so it was not an echo, but it was a little bit difficult to hear. So anyway, I sat there, and then it was over at 10 o'clock. Everybody went, and then we had to go to sleep. So then they invited me that I could join the devotees on the roof, so I had to sleep on the roof, which was quite common, because when I hitchhiked earlier, we slept on benches, we slept on cars, and in whatever place you could find for some shelter. So the roof was comfortable. There was a mosquito net. I was protected against that. And I went there, I slept. I was next to Dinanath. He was chatting a little bit. He likes to talk. He did a lot of the kirtans in those days. And he was very nice to me. He preached a little bit, and he said, you know, this and that. And then he said, well, I might be getting up early in the morning, but you don't have to. I said, okay. So I was, when it was morning, and I could hear that people were leaving, you know, putting the mosquito nets down and all the goodies, or cover it up. And then I was still in the tent sleeping, and then Brahmananda woke me up that I have to get up. It's time for Mangalarti, and you can go down. Then he saw I was a guest, so then he said, okay, but you can go to Mangalarti anyway. So I went down, put my clothes on. I had no time to shower. And then I was there, and somebody gave me some beads, and I was trying to figure out how to do that. And then Mangalarti was over, then there was a little time, half an hour, I was just sitting there, a little bit lost. So Brahmananda came back to me and he said, 7 o'clock this barber opens up here, and you shave your head and leave the sika there, this one is there, and here's a rupee. Okay, thank you. 7 o'clock I went to the little barber, playing the typical Indian music from the film music, very loud, and there were all these other people, they getting shaven, and so they saw me with a long hair like this, and I had to prepare me. So they knew what was going to happen. I didn't know. Even the barber knew. So I come back from there. Brahmananda was waiting for me, and I said, okay, you go with Sham Sundar, and you go, Prabhupada wants to see you. And then it was like, I was getting nervous a little bit. But in no time, Sham Sundar had put me in the room, and Prabhupada was doing something. I think he was speaking or recording or writing. And he looked up and he says, oh, he said, now you're very beautiful. He said, sit down, please. And then he smiled, and he sort of looked at me, and I was very humble, like looking down. I was afraid to look at him. And then he spoke. He said, what is the purpose of decorating dead bodies? And I looked up, and I looked in his eyes also, and I said, no purpose. He said, exactly. He said, Krishna has sent you here to design this temple. And it was like, it was an instruction that I could handle, I could deal with, because he said design. Because I was a designer. So I said, well, this is maybe, it's like in school, okay, this is your project. So I got this project. But then it got more, because he said, also tomorrow we have a very important day. It was the day after yesterday. It is the day when we're going to put the foundation stone for the temple here. And you will get initiated. And I said, thank you very much. And Sham Sundar, he is going to give you some paper, some pens, and some pictures, and you can start right now. And that was, to me, everything made sense. It wasn't like he's telling you something and then it sort of will disappear, you know, it is like a story or... No, he had planned it. There was paper already. There was already photos that he had collected for me to look at, study how he wanted it to be. So he gave me full direction, full support, and I had to sit outside of his room on the veranda next to the secretary. And regularly he would come out and see, either he would do something with Sham Sundar or he was very active, and he would look over my shoulders, and then I could see he was nodding his head, and Sham Sundar was looking up to him, and he was smiling, so Prabhupada liked it. So I spent 2 days there. I made drawings, and then I handed everything to him. So before that, I'm going to forget this again, the second day, we had to go out there. It started early in the morning for the fire sacrifice for the Juhu temple and the initiation. So I was together with Banu. He was a Japanese devotee. He got Brahmin initiation, whatever that was for me, but he got a thread around his neck, and I would get first initiation. And we were just 2 devotees there, one Japanese, one Dutch, and it all happened in India. And all different circumstances, and different people were there. And there was a very good mood. Prabhupada was in the Vyasasana, and he was smiling, beaming of joy, sort of. He thought it was a great thing. I was nervous like anything. Later on I saw in the films of Yadubari, I was filmed on there, and I saw myself standing there trying to join the kirtan. And that was before I got the initiation, and I was just, everything I could just see, that I was totally unaware of what was going on. I wasn't there. It was an absolute confusion. and I didn't know how to deal with it at all. But because I was quiet, nobody noticed it, but I just saw myself. And even my partner, she saw that film and it said, "You didn't know what you were doing there." I said, "No, I was lost." So then we sat down, fire sacrifice starts. It's over, you get the thing on your face, and then Prabhupada started chanting on the beach. First Banu, I think. No, I was first. He first chanted on the beach, and then he called me over, and then he put the beads around, and then he gives the name. So he said, he didn't say your name. He said, "Yeah, your name is Zorro." Zorro. The accent was very strong, and I tried to relate to it because I thought there will be a Krishna in it. There will be something about, you know, what everybody wanted to be, a name that is, you know, has substance, and it has has a ring to it. You know, everybody, when you have that name, everybody will like you. Now it was, for me, what I understood, it was Zorro. And I didn't have the courage to ask him again what he was saying. So I just took like Zorro. I just saw that sword going with the Z, Zorro. Then some devotees, when I came, I went back to my place. They said, "What's your name? What's your name?" I said, "Zorro." "Zorro?" I said, "Yeah, you said Zorro." So they said, "Oh, that cannot be Zorro." I said, "No, I understand Zorro." I said, and Shamsundar came over and said, what's the problem? I said, "Well, Prabhupada gave me the name Zorro." He said, "Oh, that cannot be." I said, "Just wait, I will ask Prabhupada." So later on he went over to Prabhupada, and then he came back, he said, he wrote it down, "Your name is Saurabha." Saurabha. I said, "What does it mean?" "I don't know." So I was almost half a year that I had no idea what. I asked people, "What does Saurabh mean?" Nobody could tell me. Apparently later on there was 2 or 3 explanations I got. One was it's a Bengali word for nice fragrance. So I was thinking, I'm not a flower, you know. It's a nice fragrance. And another one interpretation was it was a very great poet. He was a very important sadhu in those days, but he was not in the Vaishnava line. He was more towards the Persian, Middle Eastern style of thought. I thought, well, that's interesting. So I just accepted that, and I said, well, I definitely have a different name. And this is also, I could see that Prabhupada put me a little bit in a different area, that it would not be too religious for me. So it's either beautiful smell, great poet. And although I was then, because of that, I suddenly felt I should be more religious. But you know, what can you say? This is it, you live with it. And actually it sounded quite okay. So I was Saurabh. So that was all the years when I was working on the temples, except in the last year, when Prabhupada was already very ill, that I received the sannyas, and that my name totally changed into, so he knew, Surabhir Prabhu Das Swami. It was a long name, and it was a good name for me, because it was so different from Saurabh, and I felt I'm part of it now.
I believe there are many devotees like myself that were initiated by Srila Prabhupada that had limited to no association with Prabhupada. It kind of didn't matter. I've spoken to many devotees like this, we've shared these experiences. I saw Prabhupada a few times. I was with Prabhupada in a room in a darshan once. That was the closest I got. I saw Prabhupada in '72 in Boston a couple times, but I was a new devotee. I was kind of spaced out. And I saw him in Pittsburgh once, New Vrindavan. anyway, somehow I didn't have that close association, but I remember one interesting story that the closest I ever got to Prabhupada, I left, this is the time where I was saying that I had left the movement. I was living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and there was a temple in Chicago. And I'd seen posters up that Prabhupada was going to be in Chicago, and I was trying to kind of avoid the devotees so I didn't have to feel that Jewish guilt of, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm not doing it. But somehow Prabhupada's picture on the poster was irresistible, and I thought, I have to go see Prabhupada. I have to go see my spiritual master. So I took my girlfriend to the temple in Chicago, and this was the time of the big initiations. Everybody was there. All the big guns were there. And at first I talked to, I forgot, I think it was Mohanananda or Manu, and I told him, I'm playing music, and I said, but don't let anybody know that I'm playing music. It was Maya at that time. And so within 30 seconds, Drishtadyumna Maharaj, at that time, Drishtadyumna Swami was talking to me, and he was like, oh, so you play music? I'm like, come on, and he said, he said, let me get Tamal and over here. And so it was Tamal and Drishtadyumna, and then they brought me in the room with Tamal, Drishtadyumna, Vishnu Jan Swami, and they were, and basically Tamal Krishna Maharaj was really going at it with me, and he said, listen, and he was preaching to me very strongly. But it was compassionate. He was caring for my soul. But one of the reasons I was trying to stay away from the devotees was because I knew once I got in the association of devotees, I just wanted to stay. So keep in mind, I brought my girlfriend to the temple. She had never been to a temple. We were an hour-and-a-half drive away. And Tamal said to me, he said, listen, if you want to see Prabhupada, you're going to have to surrender right now. Move in with us right now. It's like, oh my God, you're kidding me. So I thought, oh my God, this is a golden opportunity. I got to do it. And I just threw everything to the wind. I told my girlfriend, listen, you're going to have to find your way back. Tamal he was heavy back in those days. So anyway, I came to the darshan room. I remember Prabhupada was sitting the whole room was, it was somebody's apartment that Prabhupada was staying in near the Evanston Temple, Evanston, Illinois. And Prabhupada was sitting on the whole floor was covered with white sheets. Prabhupada was sitting on the floor on a cushion, low desk, looking very regal. And Tamal Krishna was introducing people to him, and so there's Prabhupada. Tamal was over here, and I was kind of in the back on the opposite side of the room. And Tamal, then he said, and for Srila Prabhupada, and this is your disciple, Badarayana. And he left for some time, but now he's come back and he's surrendering now, today, to join the Devotees Association again, to be with you. So Prabhupada, he was looking at Tamal, he was like, looked at Tamal, and then he very slowly, like in slow motion, picked his head up and was like, and just stared at me for about 3.5 seconds, didn't say a damn thing. And it was mind-blowing, really. It just saw right through me and all my nonsense, and I was like, okay, I'm staying. So the look that Prabhupada gave me was a resident of the spiritual realm, an aristocrat from the spiritual realm who saw everything about me and accepted me fully for who I was, despite my innumerable faults and bumbling. I'd left the movement. I gave up his association. And so it was simultaneously all-knowing, in that, not all-knowing in the sense all-knowing, he knew everything about me. That's what I got. And all compassionate, and all forgiving, but at the same time pregnant with, okay, now you be serious. It was pregnant with that. That it wasn't like, okay, you're off the hook. I forgive you. No, I forgive you now. Get your life back on track. Be serious. That was intense. That was intense.
But another thing Prabhupada didn't like was the mosquitoes. And there were millions and millions of mosquitoes, and we were the only light around. We were on the bank of the Ganga. There was no other lights. As soon as we lit the kerosene lamp or our candles, and immediately all the bugs and mosquitoes would come. So we used to burn the cow dung to make smoke. And Prabhupada, he quite liked it. We were all crying and everything, stinging, but Prabhupada it didn't affect him. And he quite liked it. He said my Guru Maharaj used to have his chapatis cooked on this gobar, this cow dung patties. Gives them a very nice flavor. But he would complain sometimes. He said, I just put my hand under the mosquito net to get my books, and immediately they're coming biting my hand. So Prabhupada was completely unfazed in Mayapur. There was no running water, there was no electricity or anything. He had a jute stick toilet, a hole in the ground with some jute sticks around it. But still he followed exactly the same schedule. He couldn't use his dictaphone machine because there's no electricity. So he had his typewriter under his mosquito net on his bed, and he would type out with his two fingers. The purpose was unfazed. He got up at the same time he went out for morning walk, come back and greet the deities. Even there's no facility, it didn't faze him. He was just his old schedule he kept maintained perfectly.
There was a Rath Yatra festival in 1970, and everybody went up when there were festivals like that. Everybody in the temple would just piled into vans and cars, whatever, would go and drove up to San Francisco. And I was pregnant at the time with my first daughter. And there were 7 devotees left here to maintain the deities and take care of Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada was flying up Sunday morning. And Saturday evening, because there weren't many devotees, and I couldn't do a lot of different service because I was only like a month before giving birth. And so I was at at Arctic. I was the only one there. And in the old temple room, there were these doors that we'd sometimes leave open for circulation. And somebody threw in a cherry bomb. And it made a very loud noise. And basically, I was fine. I just had fallen down and paid my obeisances, and not sure what was happening, but I knew I was raised with 4 brothers, so it wasn't totally an unusual circumstance. But Srila Prabhupada heard it. He immediately called for Kurandar, and he was very concerned about what that was. And he asked, he says, is everybody okay? And Kurandar says, well, there was a pregnant woman in the temple room, but she's okay. And Srila Prabhupada was so concerned. I was touched by that. Kurandar came and told me. And then the next morning when Srila Prabhupada came to greet the deities, and we greeted the deities, and then he went and sat in his Vyasasan. And we sat on either side of his Vyasasan. I was on the very end. And Srila Prabhupada asked each person individually, how are you doing? Is everything okay? But I actually got overwhelmed. I couldn't believe how compassionate and how truly concerned he was about the devotees, that he would ask me. I was so embarrassed that I was thinking if I could just crawl under one of these tiles and hide. And so when Srila Prabhupada got to me, he just smiled. It's like he knew I couldn't talk. But then he taught us additional prayers for the Nrsimha prayers. Before we would chant Tavakala Kamala Varenakam, and but then he taught us prayers of, I believe it's Jayadev Goswami, Namaste Narasimhaya. And so he taught us these prayers, and he told us, he said, you chant these every day after Artik, and Krishna will protect you. And through the years, I've realized that Srila Prabhupada was teaching us not only how to live and go back to Godhead, but how to live in this material world. And that Srila Prabhupada, who was Abhay Charan, fearless at the lotus feet, he was teaching us also to be fearless. That's such a wonderful personality, Srila Prabhupada.
Another time I was in the Bhajan Kutir Prabhupada, and one, probably an owl or a bowl, probably a bowler. These are different, what do you say? These were different groups of spiritualists or so-called spiritualists. Coming, Gauranga Bhaktas, but the upper sampradaya, what we call upper sampradaya. So there were quite a few of these different groups who were often bringing Radha and Krishna pastime down to a mundane level. And so anyway, on this one, what they call the ekatara, it's one string, one wire, and one gourd, and they make a little instrument. And so he come in, and we could hear him, and he was singing Om Jaya Jagadish, Hare Om, Hare Om Jaya Jagadish, playing his ekatara. And Prabhupada said, "You know that song?" I said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada. I learned it when I was in Kashmir." He said, "Mayavad, go and stop him." And I thought, well, as a new devotee, I thought, well, as a sadhu, you don't you don't tell sadhu to stop chanting. But I had to do it because Prabhupada told me to do it. But anyway, by the time I walked out, he had already started leaving and gone. But Prabhupada said that in this temple, the TOVP, he said, no Mayavadis can come in. No Mayavadis, no Langis. Langi means just a piece of cloth wrapped around, this kind of casual wear. The Hindus usually wear it when they go home and they take it. No Langis and no atheists. They cannot come in, he said. No Mayavadis, no Langis, and no atheists. So this was a Mayavadi, he told me, tell him to stop.
On the way back to the London Temple on the same walk, Srila Prabhupada all of a sudden stopped. I was at the rear of the line. He turned around and looked at all of us. He could have been looking at me. And he asked the most unusual question. He said, "Why is it that one person will pay much more for the same object than other people?" Well, I was thinking, is this some kind of official policy question? So I began asking the older devotees. Prabhupada asked, and then I explained the question. No one had an answer. So then Prabhupada looked back at us all and he said, simply because someone wants to pay more than everyone else. So Prabhupada was demonstrating not only was he completely conversant in the science of Krishna consciousness, he had an in-depth understanding of human psychology, of business psychology, and of human nature.
1971, and in Bhajan Kutir, and Prabhupada was sitting on the veranda with one of his godbrothers, and I just finishing worshipping the deities, Radha Madhava, who were there. And I took the Chanamrita bowl over to Prabhupada and I said, "Chanamrita, Srila Prabhupada?" And he just tilted back his head and he opened his mouth. And he let me pour the Chanamrita in. It's, like he was my God, he was my father, he was everything for me. And then he's acting like a little kid, like dependent. Prabhupada would always come out with these you get different pictures of Prabhupada, he's different. And then his godbrother did the same and put the Chanamrita in his mouth. But the very first time I gave him Chanamrita, I offered him, and then my hand began to shake uncontrollably. I'd never done that before. He'd never done it since then, but I was looking at my hand and looking at Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was just smiling, looking at it. And then I stopped, I was able to give him. But I took it as, Maya, this is the first, a direct service I'm giving to Krishna's the pure devotee, and Maya's, this is it. It is the beginning of the end. You've finished. Do a little bit of service for Prabhupada.
So that is how I got Prabhupada into my life so strong, so deep, that everything was for him at that moment. But not for him like like a fanatic. It made so much sense again to me that I can do this. He makes it possible. If I would get restrictions, got to be this, got to be that. Although Juhu was very particular about the look of the temple, but the temple was so beautiful, that Nugavinaji temple was very sort of an influence of Italian style. You could see the Renaissance in there, from that period when, in the colonial days, were exchanges of culture and art. And that was intriguing. So that Prabhupada liked that. It was, to me, again, easier to relate to it, rather than having to make a South Indian temple, a South Indian style temple. But nothing happened. About 3-4 months later, when I stopped working finished the book with Vishakha Devi Dasi about the presentation of the Juhu project with 2 skyscrapers and theater and restaurant, then I got a message from a devotee that Prabhupada wanted me to go immediately to Hyderabad. There was land donated at Nampally Station Road, and he wanted me to go there to work on the temple, to design the temple. So I took the train and I went to Hyderabad, and there was a big pandal there, and it was a very different mood, South India a little bit, sort of in the north of South India. And then Prabhupada was sitting there, and then there were all these very rich, very well-to-do, high-class Indian communities were there, and then so I came over and he called me in. This is our architect. And everybody went like this. He is going to design the temple here. So it was like he brings in people from the West, or he makes you like that we are coming there to do something and to get to respect both ways. We learn how to respect the Indian culture, and they learned how to respect the West. That we have come, he would give many times the example of this boy here, his father is a very famous lawyer in New York or in Boston, and his son, he studied at university, got all the degrees, and see, he's become my disciple. And he's very intelligent. And this person and this person, they're all very intelligent people. They are looking for Krishna. And they've come to India to learn about Krishna, to learn about your culture that you have forgotten, that you are giving up. And they're coming here to build the temples, to do the book distribution, to teach the world about Krishna. That was his way of working. It was, from the West you bring in the best from the West, from the East you bring in the best from the East. And that goes versa, because Prabhupada's being the ambassador for Vrindavan ultimately, and going around the world and spreading the Harinam was the most important thing that India has ever done to the world. And it was just one single person. And in the same way, what he has done to us has been the most important thing for the West, to learn from what the old things are and to help preserve it, because the West is good in preserving. They have great museums. In my town, they have old buildings, 600 years old. They don't knock it down, they keep it up. That is the mood. The mood is to preserve things, to have it for next generations to see it. In India, you also have a lot of buildings preserved, but they are huge, big blocks of stone and everything. But anything smaller than that just falls apart, is not maintained, it just disappears. So he wanted that two kind of mentalities to go together and then work together and then do the most incredible things. So we were from one place to another, then later on I had to go to Nellore, he would call me there, and then again, this is our architect, very talented architect. He's now doing Vrindavan, he's now doing Mumbai, so he would sort of play us up too, and it makes us feel good. So that Prabhupada was very proud to have us with him. And then that service in India, which had, like so many people feel it's had hardship, it became a pleasure. All the obstacles that we faced, all the problems and the climatic differences, the heat and the turmoils and the rains that we had to go through, all of these were just little hurdles, and they were just part of what we had to go through to catch up with austerity, to catch up with sacrifice that we never learned to do. Our parents did because of the world wars, but it wasn't a Western thing. If you fall in a bad position, then of course that is your bad luck. But everybody wanted American lifestyle, American dream. Easygoing, everything will work. You have an idea, it will work. Just believe in it. That was the future. That was America. Even in Europe it didn't exist. But Prabhupada liked that, because that would be helpful. It's a very positive attitude. So even if these people that can think like that, send them to India, let's see how long they can keep on thinking like that. So we had those shifts. We had those first shift, second shift, third shift, like a whole plane full of devotees, practically. They would go to Bombay first, or always in Bombay first. Then a bunch would go to the south, and others would go to the north, to Vrindavan, to Mayapur. They were all divided up. And then 6 months later, another group would come, because about 50% were just not able to make it. And then by the end of the day, there was only 20% of one of those groups that would fly in. And we were there, we were like the, we were the first. And then we would just, oh, here they come again, let's see. They're all very white-skinned and haven't seen the sun yet. And then we said, let's see how long they last, And then they would be warned. They was taking pills against malaria and jaundice, and then we would say, yeah, you can take the pills, it's okay, but you gotta get the spirit. You're gonna love it being here, you won't get sick. If you don't like it, if you start complaining, you better take the next plane home again. So that was India. And all of that was Prabhupada was just there, and then he was going to the West again, and then he was continuing all his projects over there, and then he left it to us. Slowly he was going less to India. It was set up. The land problems had to be still dealt with, but he had the feeling we would get where we wanted to be. Vrindavan was quite easy. It has had some problems, but Ramareti got established first. Bombay had difficulties, but 3-4 years later it got also sorted out. Mayapur always have problems because of the communist government there. That is an ongoing thing. But things were established and some construction had started. So then there was money problem. We could not collect in India. Book distribution was not a way to do it. So Prabhupada created a life membership program. People had to sign up. But they didn't know, because we had nothing. We had books, we had pictures of the West, we could show the life membership devotees that were preaching to the higher class, richer class Indians. They would look at pictures somewhere in LA, somewhere in New York, we have this, we have a temple there. But they were like a little bit suspicious about things. And it would take some pushing and a little bit like challenging them. This is your culture, we are doing this for you, what are you going to do? We want to do this in India, and they would think we have everything in India. We have all the temples here, we have all the deities here, why you want to bring more? And then it was like, what would we be able to give them that was not yet in India? That was the most difficult thing in our preaching program there. What is different from what we are doing, which is very new and in many ways full of mistakes. They could see our mistakes. We were not Brahmins, we were not a priestly class, we didn't have degrees to be a Pandit, we didn't know Sanskrit, we didn't know that culture, we had no little bit of information about history, most of it learned from the West, which is not their history. So they couldn't see it. What are we going to do how are we going to help India? Like for them it was just give us money, we're poor, just it's better, build schools, hospitals, charity. That is good. But to make more religions in India, I said we have more religions in India than anywhere else, Vaishnava, well we have, Vaishnava, this, I have my Guruji here and then picture on the wall. And you can't talk them out of their Guru, that is, they do their worship with a little garland. So I was going on these membership trips sometimes, the preaching going on, and it was annoying to me. I was thinking, this is not good for me, because I would first have to find out what would trigger them, what would make them believe in us. And then I went back to thinking, Prabhupada said it is build those temples. That will convince them.
In Bhajan Kutir again, in 1972, Prabhupada gave me an instruction. And he was talking with his managers, and I was just sitting there. And then he said to the manager, he said, this Jananivas is an ordinary person. He has to have some help. He cannot do everything. Because I was just one pujari then, so I had to do everything morning till night. There was hardly any devotees there. So, but I loved it. But anyway, Prabhupada was considerate to say, you should have some help. He cannot do everything. Then he said, so you should train up pujaris. I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And I didn't really know what it meant. And then later on he was talking again, and then again he turned to me and said, so train up pujaris. I said, I think I would have forgotten, definitely, because we didn't really have any system at that time. I mean, there was nothing written down, or all these different mantras we didn't have. So I think I would have forgotten. But anyway, we were leaving Bhajan Kutir, and I had one foot inside and one foot outside, and I heard, train up pujaris. You hear me? I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. So good. You get instruction 3 times, like confirmation, yeah.
One evening we got to go into the garden and sit with Srila Prabhupada while Srila Kirti read the Krishna book. And I didn't want this opportunity to go by without having an opportunity to ask Srila Prabhupada a question. But I didn't want to ask a stupid question. I thought and thought and thought, and I just, because my father was a very strong Catholic, and he was particularly challenging to talk to. So I thought perhaps I'd ask Srila Prabhupada how to preach to Christians. And Srila Prabhupada was very quiet and kind of turned his head for a minute. And I was a little concerned that, I did ask a stupid question and he's just going to ignore it. But he didn't. He then turned and he said, where are the Christians at 4:30 in the morning? How are they developing love of God? And this turned out to be really an excellent point when I was speaking with my father, is that what is your process for learning love of God and developing love of God? And so in that way, Srila Prabhupada really helped me deal with my father very much.
Then Bhavananda, who was the president, Prabhupada Prabhu was the president, and so on the arrival of Srila Prabhupada, Bhavananda said, Srila Prabhupada, the devotees, they're taking this Kajur rasa. This is the rasa, the sap from the palm tree. They have date palm trees, and they cut the palm, and then the juice comes out. Then they boil it down, and it turns into molasses, gur. But you can also drink it as juice. They make it hot and they drink it as juice. But if it's left too long, especially after sunrise, it starts to ferment and becomes alcoholic. So Bhavananda was complaining to Prabhupada. They're taking this Kajuras, which is very strong, Srila Prabhupada, just like whiskey, and the devotees are drinking it. Well, Prabhupada said, oh, really? So he didn't say anything more at the time. So then, the next morning we were with Darshan with Prabhupada, and one devotee named Dwijahari Das. He was a Marine, kind of a tough guy. And he said, Srila Prabhupada, he said, sometimes me and the boys, we take a japa walk down the road and we go where they're making this kajuras and we take a few. It was really funny the way he said it. It was like, me and the boys, we go down the bar and we knock a few back. I was laughing the way he was explaining to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was hearing and he's going, oh, really, really? And he asked Prabhupada, it's really, really good. So now Prabhupada had to make a decision. He heard the management side of it, how he was trying to stop. And then he had the devotees, some of the devotees were liking it. So Prabhupada had to make a decision. So the next morning we went in there for darshan with Prabhupada. And then Shruti Kirti Prabhu came in with a glass of kajuras. And he said, Srila Prabhupada, would you like some kajuras? Prabhupada, he looked at it and Prabhupada knew what it was. He's a Bengali. Everyone knows him in Bengal, kajuras. It's quite nice. Nice. Bring me another glass, empty glass. Shruti Kirti poured him another glass. He poured because it was his glass. He poured it into the other glass. He gave it to Shruti. He said, pass it around to all the devotees so they can drink. So all the devotees were sitting around drinking kaju. Bhavananda was sitting there. He was fuming. couldn't get his way done. He was fuming. But all of the devotees. So we see how Prabhupada would adjust things according to time and circumstances.
Srila Prabhupada was still in the London temple in August of 1971, but because Hari Vilas had preached to me in Paris in the winter of 1970 and essentially had made me a devotee, he requested Shyam Sundar, I believe it was, to please send me back to Paris and join the yatra there, which I did. So that was in August of 71, and Prabhupada was still at the London temple. So anyone who's lived in an ISKCON temple knows that there's a mission to carry out. There are people with conflicting points of view, although the aim is one. And it's not always all peace and love and flower and roses. There's, rambunctious behavior, there may be angry words and so forth. Hari Vilas was a very strong-willed person, very strong and convincing preacher, and he wanted things done his way, so sometimes some of us were not totally happy. Well, out of the blue, this tall, beautiful, long-haired, sattvic appearing couple, dressed in dhoti and sari, appeared from Laguna Beach. Now we thought they were devotees. It turns out I think they were probably more impersonalists. And they began kind of undermining Hari Vilas's authority by just preaching peace and love and saying we should take the sugar out of our diet. Well, perhaps there was some wisdom to that. At that time, we rented vans and we went on traveling Sankirtan to different parts of the south of France. And this couple had some mystic powers, and they convinced me and another young American brahmachari to go with them instead and to leave this passionate organization known as ISKCON. Now, mind you, we were still chanting 16 rounds and following the four regulative principles, but we had left the temple. This is another story, but we ended up on some kind of little fishing boat on the way to Africa, and then we came back, and I realized these people did not have the answer, that Prabhupada is where I belonged. So I had no money. I just had my sleeping bag and a little incense. So I spent several days sleeping in a park in Marseille, keeping body and soul together by selling incense. By that time in Paris, Bhagavan had arrived and had taken charge. So I called him collect and I said, Prabhu, I know this sounds presumptuous, but would you please send me train fare so I can come back and join the temple? And a few days later, the train fare did arrive, and I took an overnight train from Marseille to Paris and then to the temple at Fontenay-aux-Roses. Well, Prabhupada was arriving probably within 2 weeks. So not having had any facility, I had a little growth on my chin and on my head as well, and I shaved up and gradually felt more and more like a disciple of Prabhupada and a member of this wonderful society, ISKCON. Prabhupada was arriving, but I was still very filled with remorse for having left his mission. So at the time, the temple was located in Fontenay-aux-Roses, a suburb of Paris, in a actually very small house. And according to my recollection, the way that the front yard was arranged is that it was surrounded with hedges. So when Prabhupada arrived at the airport, there was nobody to greet him. Everyone was just busy preparing the temple for his arrival. And all of a sudden, Prabhupada entered this small yard, and because of the hedges, I and Prabhupada, or I should say Prabhupada and I, were alone. Well, I saw him and I fell flat on the ground, filled with remorse for having left his mission. When I got up, I was on my knees and I looked up, and Prabhupada's face was perhaps just 1 foot from mine, and he was looking at me with so much compassion. Now, I've heard other disciples say this a number of times, that there was that sense that Prabhupada knew everything about you. And I so had that feeling, that impression, that Prabhupada was aware that I had deviated from his mission, that I had come back, that I was filled with remorse, and that he totally forgave me. That was a lesson I will never forget.
Now this was 1973, and we had just completed the Lotus building in Mayapur. And I went to Prabhupada's room and asked him a question. I said, can Lord Chaitanya wear a peacock feather? And he said, why not? He is Krishna. I said, only some of the Gaudiya Math people, they're complaining. They're saying Lord Chaitanya shouldn't wear a peacock feather. And Srila Prabhupada became very disappointed, and he just looked down. He didn't say anything else. No, I took it to mean that, my godbrothers, they always criticize me. In fact, he wrote one letter, wasn't he? How can they help us? And they can only hinder us. It was an open letter. That was my understanding, that Prabhupada was saying, why are they, picking on little things, points like this? Why don't they see what he's done? He's picked us out of the gutter of material existence, and we're shaved heads, we have tilak, we have dhotis, and we're chanting Krishna's name. Look at what he's done, rather than trying to find a little detailed fault here and there. That's the way I took Prabhupada's mood. So, anyway, since that time, I found many evidences that Lord Chaitanya, where it describes Lord Chaitanya with a peacock feather. In the Gauranga Mahima for the way to Achara, he gives a description of Mahaprabhu and meditation and description. And he says he has the Shikipucha, the peacock feather in his hair, and another one over his ear also. And then there's another, in the Nitya Leela of Mahaprabhu, when after breakfast he goes with his friends in Sankirtan, and they see all the white cows and the peacocks and everything, and he corresponds with Vrindavan Leela, when Krishna goes out with the cows in the morning. So he gets into his cowboy mood, so he starts calling out all of his cows, Shamalay, Dubalay, Gangai, Jamune, come on. And all the devotees, what's happening? Oh, he's in a mood of Krishna in Vrindavan. So they all assume the same mood as him. They all pick up sticks and start twirling them around like cowboys doing. Hey, 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 let's go off to Govardhan. Nityananda Prabhu pretends to have a buffalo horn. Govardhan, hey. And in that description also is Lord Chaitanya wears a peacock feather. And also Prabhupada asked Malati Mataji one time that, why Lord Chaitanya is not wearing a peacock feather? She said, oh, he should be wearing? He said, yes. And she said, what about Nityananda Prabhu? He said, Prabhupada said, sometimes he can wear, but Lord Chaitanya should always wear. Anyway, so we have Guru Sadhu Shastra. It became a little bit controversial.
All of that Prabhupada left to me to figure out. He didn't, it wasn't like, okay, if you have money you put marble. So we had to put marble on the floor, because you couldn't do that mosaic. So marble had to be on the floor, so we had to get good quality marble, and it's usually Prabhupada liked black and white, that we knew, that I knew. And then it was all brickwork. So we could not get good quality bricks because they were too expensive. So then Prabhupada, when he was in Vrindavan, one of those trips, so I came to his room, I had to report what was going on, and Prabhupada was like, why is it so slow? I thought that we were building, there's money. Why is... we had money before, yes, we bought the steel, we ordered the cement, we have the sand, we got truckloads of sand, but we don't have enough money to buy the bricks. So he said, so you buy this, you buy this, you buy this, but you don't buy bricks? I said, well, because we have to buy the minimum. We have to buy so much steel. So if we only buy one truck, then we will be run out very soon. So we have to order 3 or 4 trucks together. But then there was no more money to have the bricks. So he said, well, then do hundi. 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 Yes, hundi. It is a very old system here in India. You can do hundi. I said, how do I do that, Srila Prabhupada? He said, well, you go to the supplier and you say, please, can you give me hundi? And then you tell him what you want. Oh. So I say hundi, and then I tell him what he wants, and then I get it. I was in my mind going like that. He said, but they may not believe me. They may think I may have some, I may be going to steal from them. He said, no, you say, Swamiji said, give hundi. Just like that, Srila Prabhupada, just Swamiji said. You try. So Prabhupada left, and then we were looking for the best supplier. We said, we're going to get good bricks now. We're going to hundi, we're going to get, it's guaranteed, Swamiji. So let's get the best one. And let's not think too much about how much it costs, because it's going to be hundi. It's almost like a credit card, And so we had Ganga Prasad. He was the one, because I was thinking of Prabhupada's house to make special bricks, because the bricks that you can get locally are very ugly, and they break easy, and we had to carve them. So we had to have very good quality bricks. But when you carve bricks, you lose about 30 to 60%. And so we went to Ganga Prasad, and we just followed Prabhupada's instruction. And I said, Gangaji, we would like to have hundi from you. He said, hundi? I said, yes. You sure hundi? I said, yes. I said, Swamiji said. Ah, Swamiji said hundi. So he smiled. He was like, okay. Okay. What do you need? 4 trucks, please. Best quality, please. Best price. I said, I give you best quality, I will give you the quantity you want, but best price you have to leave up to me. I will deal with Swamiji about that. So, okay. Next day we had 4 trucks of bricks, and the work started. Then when the money came in, then we, of course, we had to pay off and take care of all the other debts that we were doing with hundi. No, we only used it for the bricks. So the temple was going well. And from that time on, we felt strong. And then the village got interested in us, the Vrindavan town. Because they were thinking, Indian way of thinking is, see, once they give credit, that means we will come back to them. And they could see that we were going to build, and we want quality. So Prabhupada was very intelligent that he, through me or through us, he was able to get the business community motivated, like, hey, there is money coming there. And then everybody was, the wood suppliers wanted to work with us, all the people came to Raman Reti, they wanted to work with us. Just by Prabhupada coming up with this idea, sending his disciples to do it, so that people would trust us. If he would go and do it himself, they wouldn't do anything. The Prabhupada would come, well, there's Prabhupada coming again, well, 6 months later. We couldn't get to do anything. So he wanted to make sure that we could go on and use the name Swamiji. That is his credit card. And then everything will go on. And motivate the suppliers. But the thing was, we want best quality. Yeah, Ramareti, you have to bring good quality wood, well-seasoned wood, otherwise it will be rejected. We had some engineers at site at that time also. So then also the money thing was being resolved with Guru Kripa and some other devotees that collected, and Vrindavan was going faster and faster. Prabhupada would write letters. Where are we now? It's going on, but when are we going to open? Set the date. Set the date. Who is going to do that? They set a date. It was the wrong date. We couldn't make it. Prabhupada was annoyed again. He wasn't annoyed with me in terms about the date or promising things. He was annoyed with me only because he wanted me to go faster. But he was more annoyed with those who dare to come up with a date and not really look at the reality. So why did you speak with Saurabh? With Saurabh? No, Srila Prabhupada. So how do you know you will make it ready? You want it, as well, Srila Prabhupada, you want it as quick as possible. So this is the first auspicious day. But if you can't finish it, then we have half a temple and we cannot install the deities. We put the deities temporarily somewhere else. We invite the guests. Half of the temple is not done. You have to work together. You have to discuss what is real for you. You have to set your mark based on what you're able to do. And that the money that you get, that the money is sufficient, the time is enough to build it. So he would leave me out of that part. He would not draw me into and also make me feel guilty about it, because then I would lose my concentration and it wouldn't be practical anymore. So he would purely keep me on that side. It was different from the other side. And then I was asked indirectly, what do you think about it? I said, well, if we are going to do this, then I need to have more authority. So that is when Prabhupada asked Jamuna and Gurudas to go to Gurudas and collect money for the deities. Then Bhardraj came over to work on the deities. And then I was in charge of Vrindavan to make sure that the temple got built.
But Prabhupada did ask me one time, this was in 1973 or 4, he said, how are you all worshipping the deity? So I gave him a step-by-step explanation. And and how we were undressing the deities and we bathed the deities with tilak, some lemon juice, and we polished them. Then we bathe them, we clean them, we bathe them with water. And he said, what mantras are you using? I said, well, we chant Chintamani prayers, Prabhupada. Oh. I said, also we chant Brahma Gayatri. The first thing we would do, we just chant the Brahma Gayatri before we... Oh, Prabhupada said, oh, Brahma Gayatri, Vedic. Om is there, very good. Vedic mantra, Om is there, very good. So that was it. We were just chanting the Brahma Gayatri and Chintamani prayers and bathing. Anyway, then I said, then we dry the deity. Then Prabhupada said, yes, then at that time, you should offer tulsi leaves to Krishna's feet. Which you don't find in other archana padhatis. The offering of the tulsi generally comes after the bathing, the dressing, the ornamentation, offering scents and things like that. Then you offer flowers and tulsi at that time. But Prabhupada said, at that time you offer tulsi leaves. When Krishna you just bathed and dried Krishna. And I took it to mean, like, Krishna's just been bathed and dried, and he's naked. So the first offering, what is the first offering? Like Tulsi, Bhakti Devi. If we offer Tulsi, then Krishna's very satisfied. I took it like that, and it may be correct, that understanding, because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was installing some deities in one of his Gaudiya Math, and his disciples were doing all the preparations, and they bathed the deities and everything, got everything ready, dressed the deities and tulsis and flowers. And then they called in their Guru Maharaj to come and do the Pram Pratishta, which is the official calling of the Lord. Generally, the Acharya comes and he calls the Lord of his heart, who is the Istadeva, generally of the Sampradaya. He calls the deity from his heart into the deity. So this is called the Pram Pratishta, the official installation, calling of the Lord. So they say, Guru Maharaj, you can come in and do the Pram Pratishta. So he came in to perform the Pram Pratishta, and he looked and he saw the tulsi leaves on Krishna's feet. And he said, oh, now I have nothing to do. Which indicated he thought that also that tulsi was like the prime offering of for Krishna, more important than even the Pram Pratishta. I guess it has something to do with bhakti.
In my early years in the movement, I took care of the children a lot. And book distribution was a very big issue. So my parents gave me some money. I purchased a VW van. And there were a lot of matas, families joining with children. So I would take a couple of mothers and a box of books, and we would go to a park or a beach or something and let the children play. A couple of ladies would watch the children, a couple would distribute books. And this would also free up other mothers to go into service. One time a devotee came whose husband was a GBC, and she felt this was a waste of time and that we should just put the children in a room and let them color, give them some crayons, and one lady could take care of them. And I thought, oh, there goes our program, because she had more access to Srila Prabhupada, and I thought, oh, we're dead in the water. It's over. And, but the next morning in Srimad Bhagavatam class, Srila Prabhupada was giving a class, and he was talking about Krishna and Balaram and how every day they would go to the bank of the Jamuna and play. He says, and you also have the ocean here, and every day the children can play. So in that way, the issue never came up again, but the program continued on for some time. That was very sweet, because Srila Prabhupada, I felt this very deep connection, even though I didn't have a lot of access as far as when I first joined. I remember Gargamuni and Tamal Krishna saying, you know, you just can't go into Srila Prabhupada's. They were cutting that off. You couldn't just go to Srila Prabhupada's room. And the reason made perfectly good sense. Srila Prabhupada needed his time for translating these books, and we couldn't become a botheration to him. I never felt that I really needed to do that. I always felt that Srila Prabhupada has always been with me, and even to this day when I have a need for some understanding, I just pray to Srila Prabhupada, and he sends me the answers one way or another, usually through his books.
In 1972 also, then one devotee brought some Govardhan Shilas from Govardhan Hill to Mayapur. So Chitananda said, oh great, we always wanted to worship Govardhan Shilas. So we wrote to Prabhupada about, we have Govardhan Shilas, can we put them on the altar? And Prabhupada wrote back immediately, take them back to Vrindavan. And as far as my research work, that there was no Govardhan Shilas being worshipped in any temple during Srila Prabhupada's time. And there was another devotee in America, he wrote to Srila Prabhupada, said, I have Govardhan Shila, can I put them on the altar? And Prabhupada said, when I come there, I will see. And when he came, he said, no, don't put them on the altar. But now they're everywhere. But anyway, Prabhupada told us to take it back to Vrindavan.
we had this while being in Vrindavan and becoming a more mature devotee, I realized that there was a kind of a competition going on between Vrindavan and Mayapur. In the beginning it was who was going to get money in order to build faster. Later on there were other reasons, but I was still at the time when we needed more money for Vrindavan, that one day we had to go to Bombay. Prabhupada was in Bombay, and make a presentation or ask Prabhupada for more money, because the money that was coming in was still not enough. So apparently we took a train to Bombay, and also Mayapur took a train or a plane, I'm not sure, probably a train with Gargamuni, and I was on the other train coming from Vrindavan, and we were all going to Bombay to ask Prabhupada for money. So we were sitting in that little room in front. Prabhupada was having some other things to do, we were waiting. And then Gargamuni looked at me, I was sitting over there, and said, we need more money. I said, "What you for more money?" So we were both coming there to get money for Prabhupada. So while we were doing the trip, I made a list of all details, as detailed as I could make it, why I need the money and for what. So after about 10-15 minutes, I was called in. I was the first who was called in. And then Gargamuni was going like, how much you're asking? I said, I'm not going to tell you. So I went in the room, and then Prabhupada, he was there, and I sat down in front of the desk. And he said, so you need money? I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. Again, you need money? There's not enough? Almost, Srila Prabhupada, not yet enough. But is it nice? Are you going nice? I think it's becoming very nice, Srila Prabhupada. So what do you need the money for? So I pull out my list, and I go like, well, this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. So how much is the total? He said. I said, well, close to 2 lakh, Srila Prabhupada. 2 lakh? 2 lakh. I said, okay. So I was out in 5 minutes. And so I came out of the door and I went like, I got it. How much? I'm not going to tell you. And Gargamuni came in. He wasn't prepared. He got nothing. Or he got something very little bit. But I remember that competition going on. But then what happened is that they prepared a draft for the money to send to the Punjabi bank in Vrindavan. And Prabhupada had the draft in his hand, and he was handing it over to me, and I was sitting on the end, and I was grabbing the draft, and I was pulling it, and he didn't let go. Jananivas was sitting next to me. It was really strange, so I said, maybe it stuck on his finger, so I pull a little more. He kept it in his hand, and I sort of took my hand back. Then he said, put it back to the draft, and I said, oh my God, he's going to change his mind. Maybe I was too proud to Gargamuni, or Krishna is going to punish me, and Prabhupada found out and made fun of him. I was like, we lost the money, right? And then he said to Jananivas, he said, how much does it cost if you go from Raman Reti on the rickshaw to the Punjab Bank and go back? To Jananivas, about 5 rupees, Srila Prabhupada. 5 rupees. I said, okay, I'm going to mail it, it only costs 3 rupees. So he mailed the draft to the Punjab Bank to save 2 rupees. And that was, again, Prabhupada. He gives you 200,000, but because 2 rupees difference in carrying it, maybe he didn't trust it, maybe he thought we would lose the draft. He was worried maybe for other reasons. It's a whole train ride you have to take. But he felt the mail was safer. And it went by post. And it got there. So we didn't worry about it. But my fears were over, because I thought somehow or other, you know, we're not going to get it. And then we know we got it. So we could do Hundi again. We could tell people, money is coming. Don't worry. Just go on with the work. And then the money came.
Another time, probably 1973 again. And Srila Prabhupada told me, he said, you can offer prayers in your own language if you like. I used to chant the prayers in the morning when we used to chant the Guru Vastakam and what else we chant? Chintamani or something like that. Maybe Udalayo or no. And I would recite the translations because Achyutananda was there. He had just translated all those books. So. And I would have to recite them. I don't know if it was anything to do with that or not, but I was kind of the reciter during those few years. But Prabhupada told me, you can say your prayers to the deities in English, which, according to the Shastra, you can only speak to the deity in Devanagari, in Sanskrit language. But Prabhupada said, you can speak in your own language. And there is in the Bhavasha Purana, Bhavasha means in the future, there's a Purana on the future, and it said that one saffron-clad man will come from India, and he will teach the Vedas in the language of the Malechas. So English is the language of the Malechas. And he will initiate with fire. So generally everyone offers, when they get the Gayatri mantras, generally as a samskar, it needs a fire sacrifice. Prabhupada used to use the sacrifice for first initiation also, which is not mentioned in the Vedas. It's for the Gayatri mantras. But for the holy name, Prabhupada also, and for giving first name, he gave the Hare Krishna mantra in the first name. He used the fire sacrifice, so that's something unique, which is spoken of in the Bhavasha Purana. So that it indicates Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada was so loving to the children, and they would dance in front of Srila Prabhupada ecstatically. And you could see sometimes Prabhupada would encourage them with his hand movements or his head, and he would smile at them, and you could see the children experiencing transcendental bliss. And then, of course, there was exchange when Prabhupada would give them a cookie. It was so sweet. But Srila Prabhupada, yes, he did care and loved the children very deeply. And you saw that in the exchanges with Srila Prabhupada between him and the children directly.
In India, if you buy something for a certain price, the rumors go out when you pay too much. Everybody knows that you got cheated. So once you're a victim of being cheated, then everybody will come to you. They're nice to you and this and that. So Prabhupada would get these stories coming in that, oh, Srila Prabhupada, I think Surabh got cheated again. And this was like my fear. All the time I had to hear that. Some devotee or some people were saying, I think Saurabh is getting cheated. He's paying too much for this, he's paying too much for that. And Prabhupada got these reports. And that was not only in Vrindavan, that was also in Mumbai. So if I had any kind of an enemy or a person who wouldn't like me, they would just spread the rumor he got cheated. So he's spending money left and right, and he is just, sometimes he pays twice as much, but it's the quality that is twice as good. And I just thought, I got to stick to this, I'm going to buy good quality, I'm going to get the best price possible. Prabhupada never ever asked me any question about whether I was involved in anything. He just took that in, and then sometimes when it get too much, and again, Yashovatinani, he was my inside man, because he talked a lot with Prabhupada. And he said, yeah, you had some complaints again, Prabhupada, this and this, devotees came complain about you, and you have the wrong attitude, and you're so proud, and you're not surrendered, and you don't follow, you don't come to the Mangalarti always, and this and that. And so then Prabhupada would say, if these complaints were just piling up, then Prabhupada would say, are you going to build a temple? So let him do, let him do, let him do. And then you hear that secondhand. That's what I'm saying. A lot of the qualities of Prabhupada, I can only know about me directly is practicality, common sense. But all the other things he had to deal with, that, you know, people that were dissatisfied with me, that I wasn't really doing the thing as what it should have been, and he would sort of tolerate that and then say, well, it is very difficult to do what he's doing. And you have to sacrifice somewhere. You want to chant japa perfectly. I do my 16 rounds, but maybe my mind has been not all the time on my chanting, and that was for sure. I was worried about some I was saying Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, and I was thinking, oh, this and going like that. And I work at night. We had shifts, 24 hours. I had to be out there working till 3 in the morning, and then how can I go to Mangal Arati? So usually then because when the workers also needed some time to sleep, so that's when I go to bed, and then I wake up at 9 o'clock. I was in deep Maya. But that was accepted. It was accepted I could do that, but it wasn't because I wanted to be like that. But I got protection there. And so Prabhupada wanted everything to go as quick as possible, as fast as possible, and even if I would be sacrificed, not being able to do my spiritual duties and not being able to always do what the temples do, then he would compensate for that and take that on himself, that he would protect me, that my spiritual life will not suffer because of that. In fact, maybe improve.
I was just going to perform the Raj Bhog Arati, and I just shaved, I had my head shaved, and I'd just taken a bath and put tilaks on, and I had my clean cloth on. And then the devotee came, and Prabhupada wants to see you in his room, so I went upstairs to see Srila Prabhupada. And I came in, paid my obeisances. I said, "Did you want to see me, Srila Prabhupada?" And he was looking at me, he was looking. Sparkling eyes, very happy. And he was looking me up and down, and he was very happy, and I thought, is this looking at someone else? No. But I think it was just my appearance. I think Prabhupada thought, a few years ago we were rotting in the gutter, Look, now they were wearing tilaks and clean shaven. He seemed to be very, very pleased. So you can please your guru maybe just by your dress.
I was invited on a walk with Srila Prabhupada while he was in London, and this was August of 1971. And there weren't many devotees, perhaps 12 at most. So Prabhupada would walk down Bury Place and then go to Russell Square, I believe it was. So we were all just chanting quietly, following Prabhupada's example. And all of a sudden, young 22-year-old Jaya Jagadish sidles up to Jagat Guru, Srila Prabhupada, and says, "Srila Prabhupada, can Krishna sing?" Prabhupada kept walking. He said, "Of course he can see." And I said, "No, Srila Prabhupada, can Krishna sing?" He stopped. He looked at me. He held up his hand. He said, "He is the best singer." Well, never mind that the scripture we study every day is the song of God, the Bhagavad Gita. This was an obvious question, a childish question. But rather than dismissing this silly little question, Prabhupada not only gave a sublime answer, but in his answer he encouraged the questioning and answering process between disciple and spiritual master.
Prabhupada never directly instructed us to worship Govardhan, but he said you should send back to Govardhan Hill. Whereas Shaligram Srila, he specifically says in his books that where temples have sufficient facility, they should start shalagram worship. So Mayapur was the first temple that he instructed to start worshipping the shalagram Srila. So he said, see if you can get one from some Srila from some friend. So then Jayapataka Maharaj, he had one shalagram. So we went to Prabhupada's room, Jayapataka Maharaj, Bhavananda and myself. And I don't think Prabhupada knew we were coming even. But we went into his room and Jayapataka Maharaj said, we have the shalagram, Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada, he took the shalagram and he touched to his head. And then Srila Prabhupada did a puja for the shalagram Srila, right where he was, sitting on his desk with whatever was around him. He didn't even get up from his seat, but he did a little puja for shalagram. And he got his tilak, he had his tilak there, and his Archman cup was there, and he made some tilak paste. And he had a box of matches, and he took a matchstick and he painted a little face on shalagram, little eyes, little nose, little mouth, little M-shaped mouth, each seagull-shaped mouth, and this little gopi dots. And Jayapataka Maharaj had some silk cloth from Shantipur, a very fine silk that they generally offer to shalagrams. And Prabhupada folded it like a dhoti, and then he turned his tilak container upside down. It's like an egg cup shaped thing. So he put the dhoti, and then he put the shalagrams, a perfect fit. And then he folded the other piece of cloth and like a little chadar. So he had his throne and he had his dress and everything with tilak and little face. At Prabhupada, he just sat down, he just whatever was there, he did this little puja. And he was talking. Then Prabhupada took his garland off, his own garland, and he put it around the shalagram. And he was talking, saying different things. He said in the month of Vaishak, that month has just passed just now, month of Vaishak in summertime, he says you should do what we call the shalagram, Tulsi shalagram jaldan in the Vaishnava calendar, and they drip water on shalagram and also on Tulsi Devi, in the hot countries at least. It's a cooling pastime. So he says you can perform this pastime with shalagram, and he said you can pick the Tulsi leaves in the morning after sunrise, and he said you have a piece of cloth, damp cloth, and you put the Tulsi leaves and then you put another piece of damp cloth on top. He said like this the Tulsi leaves will stay fresh whole day. Because it may be a Vrindavan tip, because in Vrindavan it gets so hot there, the Tulsi leaves will shrivel up if you just leave them there. So I think it was a Vrindavan tip. You put it in 2 pieces of wet cloth. And he says the Brahmanas, they carry the shalagram around. They have a little box or in a bag on their neck or something. And he said they go around to different places, and then they open up the box and then do some mantras, and then again they put to sleep, and then again they go to another place, and then they open and give mantra, again sleeping. He said, this is shalagram puja, mantra, sleeping, mantra, sleeping. He started to laugh, mantra, sleeping.
One may say, like you just put the question down, that 2 rupees, what makes the difference? Why is that so important? We felt as devotees, in a way we got a kind of a kick out of it. Because to us, he was telling us something. It wasn't like, I never saw, because everything is Krishna's anyway. So Prabhupada doesn't have to do that to save Krishna's money. It is us. We are not aware how difficult it is to get the money. So it goes a little bit different. We are irresponsible. Our nature is to be irresponsible. He wanted to make us understand that even for 2 rupees you have to be responsible. That is common sense to me. So that is how I saw it. I never thought that that's going to make, that Prabhupada is doing that because it is saving Krishna's money. Everything is Krishna's money. Whatever it is already Krishna's. People steal it. But for us it was, we are not going to steal. That was not our problem. That's the karmic problem. But as devotees, because we have that protection, because our karma is reduced, we still have a tendency to be a little bit nonchalant, be a little bit careless, and not understand that it is very difficult. Others have to go out in the street, collect books, collect money, to get that to India. So whether it's 2 rupees, 2,000 rupees, or 200,000 rupees, somebody worked for it. If you lose that and you waste it, it is your neglectfulness and it is not a right, responsible attitude. And that going down to 2 rupees, it was for us, it was hilarious. I mean, we were saying, this is amazing how we have to learn things and what Prabhupada really thinks of us. How much does he trust us? How much does he care about us? It all explains in the 2 rupees. He doesn't trust us, but he cares so much about us. He wants us to learn this, so that when we can teach our children the same thing.
So then we had the shalagram on the altar, but nobody knew what shalagram was, because there was hardly any Indian devotees coming forward at that time. They were very shy. Of course, we were CIA and all things like that at that time, so Sahib Mat CIA. So the Western devotees didn't know what shalagram was. You know, what? Who was that? Is it Lord Jagannath? I said, yeah, I guess so. I guess he's the Lord of the universe. I mean, he's black and he's got these white eyes. And few people know Gopal Krishna Brahmachari at that time. He was there. And that, so that, then the devotees, some Indian devotees said, this is Narayana Shila, Krishna Shila. So I was getting confused. And Shaligram, Krishna and Narayana. So I went to ask Prabhupada, and I went to his room and I said, Srila Prabhupada, may I ask you a question? He said, yes. I said, some people say that Shaligram is Krishna and some people say it's Narayana. And Prabhupada said, forget some say. Heavy tone. I kind of bowed my way out because the way he said it. I think he said it, and Prabhupada would often say when the devotees were talking, he would say, you know what they say, Prabhupada? And Prabhupada, they say, who is that? What is that authority? He says, they say, what is that authority? I think he was in that mood. The Prabhupada said, forget some say. So I didn't pursue it anymore, I bowed my way out. But anyway, 2 days later, he sent me a message, and he said, tell the Pujari he should offer the flute to Shaligram. So he's indicating we want to worship as Krishna.
Well, I had an experience with Prabhupada that I'm not particularly proud of, but it was a learning experience. This was at the temple in Fontenay-aux-Roses, outside of Paris, in August, I believe, of 1972. Prabhupada came down. It was a very, very small residence, basically. Prabhupada came down to the temple room in the part of the morning program. And he was seated in his Vyasasan, and we were all chanting very, very loudly, singing kirtan very, very loudly. And then, to my external consciousness, Prabhupada appeared to drift off. Well, I understand now, at least I understand hypothetically, that the pure devotee is not subject to the 3 modes of material nature. And what appears to me, a mundane material person, that someone is going to sleep, the pure devotee is going to sleep, no, he's not going to sleep in the way that you or I experience going to sleep. He is always deepening his connection with Krishna. Well, this speaks to my growing offensive nature to Srila Prabhupada. I shot him a dart of anger. Why are you sleeping? So Prabhupada simply gradually opened his eyes, started chanting kirtan with us again, but in a very, very undisturbed way. And I've heard other disciples describe qualities of Prabhupada or pastimes of Prabhupada in which events that would, big or small, that would cause great disturbance in most of us, Prabhupada remains totally undisturbed, be it a loud noise or some kind of threat. And so that event that, again, I am not proud of, but I did engage in, was another learning lesson for me, another lesson how Prabhupada was undisturbed by this flood of material consciousness, that because of his love for his spiritual master, he chose to be amidst and to gradually purify by his presence.
So another service I had for Srila Prabhupada, every evening I would take the frankincense round. We'd have a pot with coals, charcoal and frankincense. And every night I would go, just as before sunset, I would go in Prabhupada's room. First I'd offer it to the deities, and then I go to Prabhupada's room, and I had a fan, one of those tall leaf fans, and I would make the frankincense into powder so it gives much more smoke. And I would go around and I would put smoke in Prabhupada's room. And then Prabhupada was saying, yeah, give more, it become very thick. And I said, shall I open the windows and doors, Prabhupada? No, he said, it's okay. I should turn on the fan. No, it's okay. He liked it. It got very, very thick. You could hardly see anything. See, generally the system, in Bengal at least, you put the smoke in the room and then you turn the lights off, you open the doors and the windows and you put the fan on, and immediately all the mosquitoes, they fly straight out. They don't like that smoke. But Prabhupada, he always said, no, keep the windows closed, keep the doors closed. So this was our service every day. And of course it was, the devotees were there because it was during the festival times. And they would be having darshan with Srila Prabhupada, and it was my service. I just coming and knocked on the door and started filling the room up with smoke, and it was new to a lot of people, and they were all coughing and things like that. And some would have to leave. Well, kind of psychological, I think. Prabhupada he didn't disturb him at all. So anyway, it became a daily service for Prabhupada. Then one time there was 4 Shastrijis who studied the Rig Veda in Nepal, and they met Prabhupada and they became very attracted to him, and they started to follow him for a while. One even got initiated. I think maybe his name is Gangaram. So he said to Srila Prabhupada, can I teach your pujaris some non-fruitive mantras? And Prabhupada said, okay, you can do that. So he taught us the Purusha Shukta. This is the first time we've ever heard of the famous Purusha Shukta mantra, which is all the Vedas have chant the Purusha Shukta mantra. So he taught us this mantra. So then we would chant this mantra, and I would take the smoke, and he would have conch shell, blowing conch shell. Another devotee had a bell. Another devotee had a cup of water. So we had a little group of us, and we go around ringing the bell, blowing the conch shell and chanting Sahasra Shirsha Purusha Shukta mantra. Became known as the Bhuta Puja, or the Ghost Puja. Somehow or another, everyone said, it's the Ghost Puja. But anyway, this Shastriji, he could blow 2 conch shells also at the same time. But he could blow the conch shell, woo, and then he would keep air in his cheeks. And then when he exhausted the air in his belly, he would breathe in, and simultaneously he would let the air of his cheeks out. So there was a constant sound coming. It didn't stop. So he was woo. It didn't stop. He could do it. So anyway, then we went to Prabhupada's room one time. The devotees were there, and we knocked on the door, and then suddenly Prabhupada's giving darshan to all the devotees. So the door opens up, and all the smoke bellows out, and the bell is ringing. And he's blowing his conch shell, and he doesn't stop. And Prabhupada's, he's looking and waiting, and and it's going on and on and on. And then Prabhupada realizes, it's not going to stop. So, hey, buzz. Stop. Prabhupada laughed and laughed. But anyway, the last time when Prabhupada was in 1977, and I took the smoke into Prabhupada's room, And I used to start under his desk. I used to blow the smoke under his desk and then go all around the rooms. So I was sitting by his side and I was just found this. And Prabhupada was just sitting there. He was alone. There was no one else at that time. And he was chanting on his japa very softly. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. You could hear Prabhupada's beads ticking when they used to, somehow or another, they used to rattle in. Hare Krishna. And then he opened his eyes and he looked up at me and he said, "This gives such an atmosphere of spiritual understanding. This is so nice. So nice. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna." And then we understood after all those years, it wasn't really anything to do with the mosquitoes. Prabhupada just still had the atmosphere it created, such an atmosphere of spiritual understanding. That's what we thought it was to get rid of mosquitoes. But that was the last time he was there in Mayapur.
Srila Prabhupada was like a father to me, a loving father. Even though I have a father with a good relationship with my father, still, this relationship I had with Srila Prabhupada is very fatherly. And coming and sitting at his feet in the morning and listening to him. And sometimes Srila Prabhupada would tell stories, and he would get so animated. It's interesting because that story he tells about the mouse and the sadhu. And I remember one time when Srila Prabhupada told that story, and his face got so animated, and we were laughing, and he was laughing. And then another time he told the story, he was in a different mood, so he didn't want us to laugh. So it was interesting how Prabhupada could control the mood in the whole temple room very easily. Everyone was so tuned into him. There was another time when it was Srila Bhakti Siddhanta's disappearance day, and Srila Prabhupada had put his picture on the Vyasasana and did artik. And then he sat down and gave this beautiful lecture. And at the end of the lecture, he said that he didn't want to take sannyas. He wasn't really inclined. But his Guru Maharaj was encouraging him and wanted him to do it. And then Srila Prabhupada started to cry. And when Srila Prabhupada cried, everybody in the room cried. And I could feel big welts, trying to hold back so I could still hear what he was saying. And he said that, but now Srila Prabhupada has brought him so many sons and daughters. And he was very grateful. So at that time, everybody was just crying throughout the temple room. So grateful to have him as a father.
Prabhupada, he was presenting the absolute truth. I immediately accepted. Just everything felt right. It was that. Here is that person, and he's got the answers to the question, and he's taken us. We were all in those days. We were seeking that. We shall overcome. What is the promised land? Prabhupada came and told us what is the promise. Here is Krishna, his supreme. Here is the promised land. Go loka. We're all going back home, back to Godhead. I completely accepted it. This is what we were searching for in Prabhupada. No one else was giving, And Prabhupada gave us seva. This was his main thing. He came to give seva. No one else gives service. Because people don't like to hear, I'm the servant. They lose all their followers if they tell everyone you're servants. But Prabhupada was, he's the only one. So, I immediately accepted, and I thought, when I was reading Prabhupada's book, it kept jumping out all the time. Devotional service, devotional service. You're the eternal servant of Krishna. Krishna is the Supreme Lord, you're his servant. And I thought, well, I'll try it for 2 years. I'll just absorb myself in service. This is what kept jumping out in Prabhupada's books. And then after 2 years, I'll reconsider and see whether I want to stay or I want to go or not. But, everything felt so good and right. So, Krishna fulfilled my desire and he sent me to Mayapur, and I had to be fully absorbed 24 hours a day. I had no option. There's no other pujaris. So I was completely absorbed. And then, like 2 years passed, then 20 years, then 40 years. And I thought, gee, yeah, I was supposed to have a reassessment after 2 years. I forgot all about that. But that's how timeless the process of devotional service is. Yeah, that Prabhupada, he engages in the service of Krishna. What we're looking for that seva. But there were so many aspects of Prabhupada, wasn't there? Sometimes he was just like a loving father, old man, he was really friendly and loving. Sometimes he's very, very grave. One time I was sitting with Satsvarup Maharaj in his room. Prabhupada was walking into his bedroom and walking back again, chanting very, very grave, slowly. And then he walked up to us and he stopped and we were sitting and he's just, this chanting of the Maha Mantra is the sound incarnation of the Absolute. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Oh boy, so grave. And other times he's like a loving old man. But one thing, when Prabhupada used to do the Srimad Bhagavatam class, and I was generally sitting the other side of the end of the temple giving Chanamrita by the deities. And they would offer him chandan, and he always accepted a lot of chandan on his forehead. So by the time it dried, where I was sitting, it looked like Prabhupada had a lot of white hair. And he looked really, really so distinguished, and he was sitting up there lecturing on his... And I thought, he's so... I can't explain what... I can't really put it into words what I'm seeing. Then just after that, a devotee come up and told me, he said, oh, I read that the spiritual master is the sum total of all the demigods. I thought, yeah, well, that was it. And then when I saw Prabhupada like that, yeah, that's Prabhupada. He is sum total of all the demigods. He's quite confident to sit on that Vyasa and preach the absolute truth to all the demigods and all the sages. He's such a... He looked so refined and such a distinguished gentleman. He looked like he had grey hair and just sitting up.
In the 5.5 years that I had association with Srila Prabhupada, and when I learned about Krishna consciousness, there was a consistent quality that would come out in every meeting I had with him. And it was based on practicality. I think the way he would see me and he could steer me in doing what I had to do, because I was very short, at a very short period that I had to learn Krishna consciousness. And I also had to make these drawings and try to make temples that I wasn't really sure about what he really wanted. But after I began to work and I was on my own, and whenever I was called in the room or he wanted to tell me or give me some instruction, it was always the same thing: common sense, common sense, common sense, which was for me the thing that I was worried about in joining, that there was not enough common sense, too much faith, too much praise, and too religious. And he always made it like it is just a normal thing, and you're just doing what you're doing normally, but you do it for Krishna, and I will teach you how to do it for Krishna. So in every situation, whenever there were some problems, and I actually never asked him what to do. He would just give me the direction by talking to other people. I would just listen. And then I would just go on and keep on going. And if there was a moment that he was feeling that I would not be sort of in the right, going in the right direction, then he would again come back with that very down-to-earth approach, and he would just give me that opportunity to be myself, to go on with the creative part of me, and he had the faith that I would stick to that, because once it makes sense, I could work. So making sense to everything. It wasn't philosophical, it wasn't mystical, it was just exactly the way I was. And that is what intrigued me, that he was able to see me and how to use me in a very short period of time, and having me do things that actually I couldn't do, but I felt that by him being there, I could feel Krishna, which I would never even attempt to think that I had anything that I could get mercy from Krishna in that way. So I would always go back to my guru, that is Prabhupada, and I wouldn't allow myself to think any further than that. This is a job, it's got to be done. I'm going to sit and work here with contractors. I got to count bricks, I got to make accounts, I got to make sure that money will not be misspent. I have to be careful for being cheated. And this was a thing that was just going on during this entire 5.5 years that before he passed away. So that is the quality that he showed to me. I've seen many other qualities that he showed to others, but to me it was always the same thing. And there was one time when I asked him a question about architecture, I cannot remember what it was, and then he said, "Why you ask me? You're the architect." I said, "Use your common sense, you will know, you will find out." And that was giving me the freedom that even at that point where which I thought I needed direction, that Prabhupada would still allow me to do it myself. And he said, because these temples, he said, like in Bombay, he was very particular about what he wanted to, with the result, and it was the Govindaji, New Govindaji Mandir from Vrindavan. He gave photos, and he wanted that kind of look. That was the only thing that he ever gave me, very particular about a temple where I worked on. In Vrindavan, he did not tell me anything at all. He just sent me there, and I was there at the site, and there were no drawings of the look of the temple, so he just told me, make it different. He said, this is a temple where we want the world to come to. We want European, Western, American people to come here and learn about Krishna in Vrindavan. And this temple will be their place. So that's why I had to be but then once you get that freedom that he would give me all the time, you become more careful. So I would be doing more research, and I would just try to see what is Prabhupada's feeling about being very strong Indian, very strong culture, even in his speech. And at the same time, by his spiritual master having him sent to the West, he opened up, and probably for Prabhupada himself must be quite an eye-opener to see the Western world. It's a madhouse, but that all these people came to him, and they were respecting him because he came from India. And I think that respect, the natural respect, that just because you come from India, you're a holy man, that attracted Western people enormously in those years. And that's why we were all part of that. So Bhargava earlier, he asked me a question about what was your spiritual motivation? Did you have some kind of vision or thing like that? I said, no, I never had that. Because when I went to India, I just went there like a young man, studied the culture, the traditions, and things that lasted for thousands of years. That's what I thought, how do they do that? So Prabhupada came from there. He came from thousands and thousands of years of ancient knowledge, but it was only when I met Prabhupada that knowledge came into the picture. Before it was pure culture and art and what you see on the outside. And Prabhupada gave the insight, slowly, slowly, the importance of what India can offer to the world, because that was very strong in his preaching. And even to the Indian people he would say, you are already with Krishna. Just make sure that you don't lose Krishna, but export Krishna. Krishna belongs to the whole universe, not just in India. And from there on, all the projects that I worked on had that same song, that same feeling. And then, of course, as you progress in Krishna consciousness, I learned slokas, I learned a little bit Sanskrit, I learned the philosophy. So the appreciation, it wasn't just the service that he gave, also the time we got, because there was no money. And that period of no money was so perfect to do other things that I would never be able to do. So we could study the Shastras, and we were serious about it. And we listened to his tapes, and we listened to his speeches and his talks and his lectures. And then we tried to incorporate that in our own way of thinking, and at least I was preaching that way. So this is how Prabhupada would say it, and how would I use that information, that knowledge, in a slightly different way by which I could reach other people. And maybe in the art community they are more sensitive for a certain way, certain approach. So I started adjusting myself, but always on that principle of it has to make sense. When you talk to people, whatever you want to say, it's got to make sense. It's got to be simple, it's got to make sense.
I was so captivated by the mood at that time was serving Prabhupada in his mission. Prabhupada was the consummate preacher, this mood of saving the planet and helping conditioned souls whose future was very dark. And reading Prabhupada's books, being in the association of devotees, going on Sankirtan, experiencing the absolute nectar of being in kirtan, chanting the holy name. It was just deeply transformative for all of us. We were living in a whole other world. It was the spiritual world, but it was fueled by Prabhupada's immense compassion to become pure and give that to others. Help them, help me to help them. So it in one sense, although I was fortunate to have that, it didn't really matter. And many devotees that I know who were initiated by Prabhupada, because I was initiated by Prabhupada via a letter, and Satsarup Maharaj did the fire yajna. So, but I didn't need that connection. So that association of Prabhupada is available to everyone. It's available to everyone, and it's through his books, through his, and I think I find so immensely important, having been around for some time, is of course reading Prabhupada's books. I find that I have to read Prabhupada's books every day, even if it's for 5 minutes or hear a lecture. At the same time, I also find that one of the most valuable book or series of books that I've ever read for my devotional life is this memory series that you have done, Siddhanta. I'm not just saying that. And the reason is it gives you very profound glimpses into Prabhupada's mood. Prabhupada acting Krishna consciousness in real time. How did the pure devotee apply the high philosophy in every type of practical situation imaginable? From devotees arguing to conflicting philosophical viewpoints, to dealing with somebody that left his movement, to dealing with somebody that was feeling insecure, to dealing with sexual issues, to every imaginable situation, philosophical deviation. And by reading the anecdotes in the Memories series, you really get a glimpse into how do we apply Krishna consciousness in a way that's meaningful. Prabhupada, like I was with Shyamasundar recently, he said, blew my mind all the time that Prabhupada, sometimes in one day he would tell one devotee one thing, and 6 hours later he'd say the exact opposite to another devotee. But it was perfect, perfect. So how do we apply this principle of time and circumstance? Prabhupada was a master of time and circumstance. But we don't really know how that works unless we hear how Prabhupada applied it. And that's what I found so illuminating about these books. I couldn't be in all these places where I never had that type of association with Srila Prabhupada. But you can get all that association in these little anecdotes, because they give they don't go deeply into the stories, but they give the essence of how Prabhupada, the things that really stuck out in the early disciples' minds, of how Prabhupada acted here, acted there, exposed this person, captured this person's heart, brought this person back. And it was always brilliant, perfect, with perfect philosophy, perfect compassion, sometimes soft like a rose, sometimes stern and hard like a thunderbolt, but always the proper medicine. So this has been, I feel, an invaluable contribution for future generations, and I just want to thank you for that.
Jaya